Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics on Tuesday, June 28th. And we have a live silver chat today where we are going to be taking your questions. Well, hello there, my friends. Whoops. Chris Marcus here with, excuse me on that. Believe we have Pimpy Lee from Pimpy's investment chat joining us shortly. Looking forward to talking silver with him, taking your questions and seeing how everyone is doing out there. I will pull up a chart of the silver price in case you have not seen it yet today. Silver down a bit, down 26 cents. And actually, fortunately, there we have Lee from Pimpy's investment chat joining me on the line, and he'll be logging in here in a second. Lee is connecting to audio, so we will have him momentarily. But again, as you can see, the silver price had been a bit higher and then just took a nosedive over the last couple of hours. And as you can see here on the price and volume chart, a lot of volume right as the market opened in New York, and we will be digging into this, but mostly taking questions today. I'm not gonna go through too many news stories. Before we do get started, I'd like to mention that this video is brought to you by Sierra Madre Gold and Silver, that is moving 3 projects into production. Recently did a deal with First Majestic. We'll have a note on them at the end, although I see Lee has now made it in there. So Lee, great to have you on here today. How's everything going with you, my friend?
Oh, much better now. Just my apologies. A little technical difficulties there, but we're good to go. How you been, sir?
I'm doing well, and we have a bunch of people logged in and ready to talk silver. So perhaps before we get started, you could just let people know how you got into silver. You have a channel, Pimpy's Investment Chat, and give people a little bit about the background, and then we'll get your take on the silver market and then head over to some questions.
For me, I got started dealing with silver when I was younger. Of course, like a lot of other people, they you start coin collecting, and I started collecting different types of coins, and it was explained to me by my grandmother of all people that some of these coins are a little different than others, and that's because of the precious metals that are involved. So at a young age, I quickly learned that some of the coins I collect have silver in them, and some of them had gold. And as time went on, that they also affected the value of the coin that I was collecting to some degree. And that's since I was like 11, 12 years old. I'm just like a few years older now, but than I was then. But that's how I first got introduced to silver and gold, and that they had a real value. And my grandma used to tell me stories about coins that had silver in them. The funny thing is, I actually am old enough to remember going to Las Vegas with my parents, and they used to have the silver dollars come out of the machines. And I remember those. I remember they're the old Oregon dollars. My mom used to throw them down in her drawer because to her it's like loose change. But it's just funny how far we come in a short period of time, or at least to me, it seems like a short period of time anyways.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned how things have changed. We talk a lot on the show here, and I know a lot of people mention the US being taken, the dollar being taken off the gold standard back in 1971. Yet, as I think most people are familiar with, we actually did have silver in the coins. And that really ended in the late 60s when you had LBJ doing the guns and butter and realizing that you run into trouble when you're trying to spend a lot of money that you don't have. And has led us to an interesting point today where I don't know if your grandmother, when she was telling you about it then, mentioned all of the money printing really around the globe, not just out of the Federal Reserve, certainly in Japan, Europe, basically everywhere. Did you imagine that we would reach this point? And perhaps also onto that, where do you see things right now?
That's not an area, obviously, that my grandma touched on. I think she was a coin collector herself. So we just talked about coin collecting in general, and then a lot about silver. As far as where we are, it's hard not to answer that question without seeming like I'm going into some tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy, but to me, I kind of noticed there seems to be some type of agenda out there, and finance is one territory that's being attacked, in my opinion. So to see gold and silver respond the way they're doing right now to what's going on around the world between the wars, inflation, financial crisis, it doesn't, me and you will text from time to time, or I'll listen to what you have to say, and I'll, pass it on to a lot of my listeners saying, look, I listen to Chris Marcus, he hit something right on the money. The metals don't seem to be responding the way they should in a situation like this. What do you think?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to look at that. Obviously, if you bought silver a year ago when it was 27 or 28, or even a couple months ago, I believe got close to 28 again. It's frustrating seeing it lower. We do have the Fed hiking interest rates right now, so that would be a factor. That would not be necessarily the time when you'd expect a move up. Yet I keep thinking about the gold price, where still 1820, 1830, and silver. I mean, after that sell-off, it's, again, down today, but has floated around that $21 to $22 range, while a lot of other assets are getting sold off. And I think a lot of people don't really know what to expect. I think the conversations that we have here, and that people who have studied the Austrian business cycle, from my experience on Wall Street, that's not how people are looking at things. They're thinking, how do I get my return next quarter, next year? And so with that said, it seems to me that the debt hasn't gone anywhere. The Fed is still backed into the corner. Even Powell's now admitting that there's a recession on the way. You had this unusual quote last week talking about how we need central bank digital currencies to help maintain the dollar's role as the reserve currency, which I thought was interesting comment. So with that said, though, we do have
are you seeing a lot more people starting to talk about the central bank digital currency? A little bit, I'm starting to see people wake up to it, but it makes me sick to go on YouTube and see all these crypto pumpers praising the idea of joining the new world order, and they're happy that their crypto is part of this agenda. And I'm like, no, do you understand what the bigger picture is? And come to find out, they don't. They're just, they have XRP or XLM or any of the other cryptos that are part of this push for CBDC. And I made videos on this saying, look, you guys understand what the central bank digital currency is. You don't even have to take my word. I have a video clip of a guy called Turtle. He looks like a turtle. It's Augustine from the Bank of International Settlement, explaining to people exactly what the central bank digital currency is. It's a currency that's digital, obviously, but they control 100%. They set the procedures and policies and everything that is involved with the central bank digital currency. And then it's programmable. It's a currency that's programmable, which means they have the ability to decide what you can and can't buy. Now, we notice not to get all into politics, but there are a certain political group out there that is going after our amendments, our constitutional rights hardcore right now, especially the second one. So, without violating our Second Amendment, all they have to do is program the currency so that it's not allowed to buy ammunition, buy guns. You could target your political opponent by cutting off their access to the currency. So the central bank digital currency is not your friend. The fact that there's people out there pumping it because they own one, two, or a handful of the different cryptocurrencies that are part of this New World Order agenda, it's just mind-blowing to me that they're comfortable with that. They don't realize that. Here, Chris, let me run something past you. Let's say you and I are getting ready to take over the world. We got all the money we need because we know money has no value. I can just go in my back room, print out $1 trillion, use it to give to all my little useful idiots out there to do what I want them to do. I want you to pump these particular cryptocurrencies. I'm going to make you a millionaire. And you're like, oh, yeah. Congratulations, you become a millionaire. But do you know that the CBDC has an expiration date on there? So as soon as they give you the money, and it's going to be in central bank digital currency, or eventually to switch over, then your money expires if you don't spend it. You know, some people go, well, I could spend it really quick. Well, go ahead. But you remember, there's a certain slogan floating around right now, and it means something to those people. And that is, by this year, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's changed in the last couple of years, where the rules of the game and what was conceivable to me from politicians and bankers, I mean, I think we blew past that, and at least leaves me in a situation where it's like, geez, you're really playing defense on a variety of levels. So I get what you're saying there, and certainly I'm not running out to get my central bank digital currency. We'll see how that all shakes out.
Well, there's where gold and silver comes in, because I tell people, look, if you want true freedom, you want to be free, you got to understand that you have to have something outside of the system. You have to have gold and silver. You have to. One preserves your wealth. The other one you use to barter with or use as a way to do transactions for things you need. Now, for the last few years, I live in a small town, which I love. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. I lived a big part of my life in the Bay Area, but currently I live in the boonies, which I love. A couple of years ago, I started going down to the business leaders and trying to get them to, you know, find a way to organize, because many businesses, they don't have a business owners association or anything like that. So recently we've been talking about what is going on, and a lot of people don't have the time to keep up on this, and that's the sad part. But I told them, we have to have an alternative to central bank digital currency. That's the latest thing we've been talking about. They go, well, we could just continue to use the old currency just locally. And I go, no, you're not going to be able to get it. That's what I'm telling you. One day you're going to wake up, the banks are going to be closed, there's no more fiat currency, and they're going to force you into this digital currency, which means we have to come up with our own physical currency. And come to find out, Chris, it's doable. There are companies out there that make currencies for you. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. You might be. In Massachusetts, there's a town there that they've created their own currency. So all the regular, normal, fun-loving things that we run into as far as our economy is concerned, they don't have that issue, because the currency can only be used within this town. So when you come in there, you take your fiat currency, exchange it for their currency, and you can use that locally. But when you leave, you can't use it anywhere else, which I think was a brilliant idea. And I said, look, we got to look into this. And we've been looking into this and talking to we have a local bank that's independent. Isn't any part of these bigger banks. We've been talking to the manager, but right now he's not an easy guy to talk to. He just thinks it's all in our head. And I go, despite all the evidence that I'm showing him. And then I finally convinced him. I said, let's do it this way. Let's say, for the sake of it, hypothetically, we run into this. Can we at least come up with an alternative plan, just in case? He goes, I don't have a problem with that. I think we could do that. We can come up with an alternative to banking if you're correct. So at least we have him considering this. We're trying to put together a plan now. Have you ever seen those gold-backed dollars, the ones with the 24 karat on the back?
Mm-hmm.
You have that's something we talked about. I said our money would be backed by gold, literally. We talked to the company. It's really super expensive to have a bunch of currency. And the other issue is, you know, could it be possible that the government tells them you can no longer do that? And then what happens if we bought a lot of this currency? People like the gold on there. They take it out of our town. Now we're out of currency. We're back into square one again. So these are things I never thought I'd have to consider in my lifetime, but here I am talking to local business owners about what we need to do as an alternative. But more importantly, for individuals who are listening right now, you have to have gold and silver, physically own it in your possession. Because when the doo-doo hits the fan, the only thing that's, you know, promising you freedom is the ability to stay outside of the system. And if you don't have a way to stay outside of the system, well, then you're stuck in it and there's a problem. And you're going to find out what all those problems are quickly.
Well, I hear you. And it's certainly not the easiest of times for people to figure out how to resolve this. Although, Lee, we do have a bunch of questions already coming in. So let's, if that's all right with you, let's get your opinion on some of the things that people are out there asking. Paul Choi says, with everything being manipulated in the paper market, can the banks being net long on silver be trusted? I have some thoughts on that, but I'll let you take that one first.
Anything, how do I answer this? I've become such a skeptic, and I question everything. So anytime something that I believe is part of the system, like a bank, I don't trust anything that they say or do. I do pay attention to it, but everything they say I do with a grain of salt. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, it's unfortunately, but I had a friend of mine, CIA. Me and him been friends a long time. Older man. And he had this way of, when we were talking, having these conversations, he kept telling me all the time, you have to question everything. We would see an event, he would say, stop. Now let me give you an alternative way to look at it. I know this sounds crazy. He says, don't look at it from 10 feet away. Look at it from about 30,000 feet above. What is the bigger picture? And so my mind, unfortunately, just thinks that way. So as far as silver along, I can't help but feel like these institutions are part of this bigger problem, and they're doing everything they can to manipulate the price of gold and silver. And could this just be another form of manipulation? I think so. What about you?
I think that's a fair point in what you said. I believe JP Morgan got in trouble for not reporting data accurately.
What?
For what it's worth, here you see the commercials in the red line here. There are a few different ways of measuring how long or short the banks are, but at least by this metric, this gray line here being flat. So the closer the red line is, the higher up. That means the closer to being flat the banks are versus down here, they're more short. And you can see here at a peak where it's higher, beginning of a rally. You look where the banks are short, price comes down. Here it's closer to flat, it's kind of heading north, and banks get short. You see what's happened there. And now we are at a point where they're a little bit closer to flat on this metric. In one of the COT reports, you can see the swap dealers numbers show them net long. So kind of like you said, we're not seeing things in absolutes, but again, my background being an option trader, looking at probabilities, I think it's an indicator. Does that mean go pile in things on margin like, Michael Saylor of Bitcoin? I would say if there's ever a market not to use leverage or margin, silver would be it to me. But so Paul, hopefully that's helpful. I would use it as an indication rather than an absolute.
See, this is one of the things I love about watching your channel. I mean, you're showing a graph that appears to me to show, whenever the price starts to take off in silver, all of a sudden shorts come out, brings the price back down. It looks like manipulation to me. It really does. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't there some special memo that came out recently, and that is not to allow silver above $30?
That does seem to be the school of thought. I've had some suggest some of the inner workings. I wonder if we ever got records to what the Exchange Stabilization Fund, which talks about intervening in the gold market, on their website. It would be quite interesting to me to see what shows up there, what the Fed desk is trading, and in terms of things I can't prove, but based on the conversations I believe, and plus what Ross said about the market structure that tamps down. But even aside from that, how he was concerned of a much worse outcome, I think that's what was happening last year.
Chris, here's the thing, with the powers that be, again, it's kind of hard sometimes to talk about things without seeming like we're going into this whole conspiracy field, but people need to pay attention to the World Economic Forum and their Great Reset agenda. If you're not familiar with them, you need to get familiar really, 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 really quick. The more I dig into them, the more sick I become. I'm not even kidding. You can understand what these 5-point attacks seem to be: healthcare, finance, the internet of value. I mean, all these different food. People need to wake up to the fact that our media is manipulated. We know this. They're a propaganda arm. Nobody's talking about the fact that over 300 food processing plants have been burnt down. Prior to that, something in the neighborhood of, 150 something lumber yards have been burnt down. What the hell? And they're like, it's no big deal. It happens all the time. No, it doesn't. Now our own livestock has mysterious viruses like we do. There's veterinarians out there going, what the hell are you talking about? I don't find anything that you're finding. Well, use this PCR test. You mean the one we use on humans? Yeah, no. It appears that there's an agenda to starve people. And come this fall, we're going to have a huge food shortage. And it's already starting now. England's having riots, Uganda, Japan, China, Peru. These citizens are rising up right now. And they're protesting about the hikes in food. You got to understand that what's going on is really a planned event. Our fuel costs are higher than ever before. I mean, Biden coming in with this Build Back Better. He acts like that's his slogan. It's not. It comes from the Great Reset. Build Back Better. These people's goal is to create a one world government. And for those of you who think, well, it's conspiracy, you really need to do your research because they say so on their own internet. When you go there, Chris, they have all these they have like a mapping of how each one of these certain departments, there's a governance that's created. You have the governance of the internet, the governance of healthcare, you have the governance of finance, because what they're going to do is they're going to create all the problems. And when all hell breaks loose, they're going to say, hey, calm down. We have your solution. You created a damn problem. Why would I trust your solution? But most people aren't going to know that the very people slapping you in your face are the same people trying to feed you and protect you.
I hear you. And perhaps along those lines, we have Bitwave Dave, who actually met in Arcadia office hours last week. It was a pleasure to meet you there, Dave. He says, how long can the silver manipulation last? Does the entire system have to crash in order for price discovery to happen? What would you say there?
Well, I can tell you this. We know that the manipulation has been exposed several times over. Chris, did you not file a claim with, is it the CFTC? Is that who that is? That you filed with your proof of manipulation? What was the conclusion of that, by the way? Have you ever heard anything back from that?
I've never heard any response from the CFTC regarding the evidence I submitted, the letter that I wrote to Ross, and had reached the media director at one point who kept promising to get some sort of answer. And then eventually she just said, can't comment on an ongoing investigation, which I wonder if that means that they actually are investigating. I know there's still the JP Morgan traders are facing RICO charges, and perhaps.
Yeah, but how many times has JP Morgan been busted for their involvement in some, illegal activities, but they're still allowed to continue to function as a business? When they pay the largest fine in the history for manipulation, it was like almost $1 billion. And I was like, why do you feel like that's a big deal? They make that in like 2 days. So it's like, what? Just like you coming to me and say, you know what, we're going to get you for your crime of stealing millions of dollars from people. Reach in your pocket and give me 50 cents right now. Okay, sure, buddy. But you're not going to take away my ability to continue to commit fraud? No, there's a criminal element has definitely taken over governments around the world. So as far as manipulation, will it ever stop? I think we're going to get to a point where people, where they back themselves, I should say, into a corner where their ability to continue doing what they're doing, there's no longer a way for them to do it. And it's just going to be exposed. I feel like we're there now, but every time you think there's nothing more they can do, they reach into their bag of tricks like Felix the Cat, and poof, they have a new way to just continue this charade for as long as possible. But if I made just one thing I want to make a point about, when it comes to gold and silver, you guys, stop worrying about the value of gold and silver. I don't care if it goes down to $1 an ounce, and I mean this. understand that you will need that in order to be out of the system that's coming up. So if you're focused on what the value of the gold and silver is, then I believe you're looking at it wrong. I really do. These people have the ability to knock their value down to nothing. Something is only as valuable as any one person gives it. In other words, I could look at a Picasso painting and I go, that looks like crap. I wouldn't pay $2 for it. But you got another person out there who's willing to pay you 200 million for it. Okay? This is why community is important. This is why you guys established that if this happens, what do we all agree the value of gold and silver is going to be? Because we know it has real value, but the people that we're up against have the ability to convince us that possibly it has zero value. Well, we know that's a lie. How the hell are they going to move us into this Green New Deal without silver? That's probably one of the biggest reasons why they continue to manipulate the value of silver, is because if it gets too high in value, we'll understand that all of our technology, cell phones, computers, how the missile guidance system, I mean, this becomes a national security issue. There's not enough silver out there. There's been a shortage. Is that right, Chris? It's what, 2014, is that right? We've been in deficit?
I say the latest Silver Institute numbers show the last 3 years when you account for the ETF data. So perhaps not that long, but especially with the volatility, it's certainly not encouraging future supply to come on. And a lot of the mining executives I talked to have spoken about that. So, and like you said, perhaps one thing for people to keep an eye on is that you see Russia looking at gold. You see a couple of days ago, Joe Biden was saying they're going to sanction any Russian gold trading or not allow that to happen via the US and Russia. So it doesn't seem like they don't care about it as they suggest.
Yeah, I mean, how realistic is that? I mean, they're talking about how they're going to crush the economy of Russia. Then Russia does a great job of backing their currency up with gold. I told everybody when they devalued the ruble all the way down to 0.0072 in value, I said, man, if you had the money to invest in rubles, you definitely want to jump on that. It didn't take them very long. Now they're one of the strongest currencies in the world, and the value jumped up to, I believe, it's what is it, 0.018? You know, it's 143% increase in value in a very short period of time. And so, and it's just going to continue to climb. They're going to, you know, making that move and trying to stop Russia from doing what they're doing. It's not easy to do when you have India and China buying their oil at a discount and then reselling it back to the United States. And the United States knows this is going on, but still they continue to buy oil from all these different places, knowing that it actually comes from Russia. But they know that the average citizen won't do the research. They'll just believe anything that they're told. You know, this is Putin's inflation. It's gas prices are because of Putin. And Joe Biden fell off his bike because of Putin. You know, he fell up some stairs because of Putin. It's like, no, these things were already happening, you know, long before Putin. You know? So it's ridiculous. When Trump got in office, everything was Putin. Now that Trump's out of the office, everything's still Putin. It's this thing has, it's an agenda. It's bigger than people know. And if this is a planned event, whether people want to believe it or not, the more you research into it, the more you're going to realize that you absolutely have to have gold and silver, and you can't pay attention to what the paper value is that you see on the stock market, because it's part of this manipulation that's going on.
Yeah, and interesting, like you said, it's everything aside from the Federal Reserve's fault or the fact that the debt doesn't get talked about much anymore, 30 trillion plus soaring, and you see Joe Biden talking about student loan forgiveness. He's talking about the second pandemic and how he needs more money for vaccines. So anyway, with that said,
what the hell happened to the virus? It just all of a sudden disappeared like a fart in the wind. You got protesters out there. Nobody has a mask anymore. You know, I told people, come on, wake up. If we had a real virus, you would see on the news that these politicians were serious. They don't just wear a mask when they're on camera, and then when they're off camera, take it off. We see that all the time. We see time and time again, a lot of these politicians at events, they're partying. Obama's birthday, nobody had a mask. Gavin Newsom's had a gathering, he had no mask. Nancy Pelosi took off her mask to have her hair done when she told everybody to stay home. I mean, we could go on and on. You know, if this thing was truly that deadly, then why the hell is it that I could go around in California and see a kabillion homeless people? They would all be dead, while the big majority of them would be dead. They're not, because it isn't like they're telling us. They're just lying. Not that we want to go down that path, because unfortunately, when I said that these people control a lot of what we hear, eat, and see, you know, they do. And that includes YouTube. So if you're saying something against this agenda, they will remove you right off of YouTube. By the way, this Internet of Value governance, they will have the ability to decide who they believe is passing off so-called misinformation. And when I tell you this is not exaggerating. Dr. Shiva actually exposed it. They have the ability to remove an individual, and I mean literally off the internet. There's no more email, no more texting, no more cell phone. You won't have a website. You can't go on any social media platforms. This entity was created not that long ago. So think about that. If you're like one of us who are trying to tell people the truth, and then they find out, they go, ooh, this person has a reach of this amount, that person is influential, and just remove you. You no longer exist. When you try to get back on and go to another website or create a new profile, you won't even have the ability to do that. That's how scary this is.
Well, certainly some challenges out there, which I guess can be overwhelming, although something to be said for appreciating where we are today and what we do have. And that's one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately. And with that said, we have a question from Jake that came in a little while ago saying,
yeah, sorry about that, I got sidetracked, you know.
No, that's all right. Well, we got plenty of questions coming in. Jake asked something you touched on earlier. When it comes time to sell some silver, will the sovereign coins bring more than the generic rounds? And I would think that that would still hold true, but what would you say there?
I mean, I think what you're seeing right now is it's funny to see that the premiums changed on constitutional silver seem to increase. Why the premiums on, you know, the other things like EOS or maybe rounds seem to be coming down just a little bit, but people are going back to what they know, which is real money, silver, pre-1964 coins. So their premiums on them seem to be increasing. You know, I think that's the idea is, I think a lot of people are thinking maybe that it's something that could be used in the future, you know. I don't know if I'm answering the question properly, but I just noticed that the constitutional silver in the United States, the premiums are going up. Are you seeing that anywhere, Chris?
Yeah, well, the premiums have gone up on the silver eagles, the junk silver in particular, where there is a finite amount of the junk silver. They're not making more of that. And the silver eagles, you have the mint sitting there not producing anything. So there's a bit of a supply and demand, which is not to say that silver is not available, to be clear. It's been more so depending on the product. But I would imagine that you're still going to have that same issue even with a higher silver price, and will be interesting.
That just tells you that the demand's there, if you ask me. You know, people are like, the premiums are so high. Well, guess what? People are paying it, or the premiums wouldn't continue to be that high. This is why I say stop paying attention to what the market is showing you is a value of gold and silver. Obviously, the people out there believe it's worth more, or they would not be paying more to possess it. You know what I mean? They own it, and they're willing to pay the higher price to have it. I think it's weird that our mint is short on silver, considering our Constitution. And this is another thing that people are just, man, we got to get back to civics class. But our Constitution says that our government has to have the silver available to meet the demand of the people. And if they're telling us that, you know, they don't have enough coins, or they had to shut down for one reason or another. I remember the first time they shut down, it happened to be right around silver squeeze, and they made an excuse that they were changing over to a new system or die or whatever their stupid excuse was. And I thought to myself, no, it isn't. They don't have the silver. They just don't have it. And so, Jake, I'm sorry, there's a long way to answer your question, but I tell people that listen to my videos, I don't give a rat's butt if it goes down to a dollar an ounce for gold and silver. That doesn't change how I feel about it. And it doesn't change the reality of how it's going to be used. 6,000 years of recorded history tells you gold and silver has a lot more value than this crap we got floating around out there.
I think that would actually be great if we saw $1 silver. I mean, I'd be in the midst of this environment. I'd be darn happy to buy silver for $1. I don't think we're gonna get anywhere near
Me
that.
and you're the same way, but my subscribers are like, no, what are you talking about? You know how much money I will lose? No, again, if you're talking about gains and losses when it comes to silver and gold, then you're not understanding the real value of gold and silver. Don't get me wrong, we do pay attention to it, and we love for the value to skyrocket, but the true value, you can't put a price on freedom. Let's be real. What you have, forget the money. With gold and silver is you have freedom outside of the system. Now, you ask yourself this, what is your freedom worth to you? Because that's truly what we're talking about. And that's not being hyperbolic or exaggerating. No, that's the reality of what's going on right now in this world. So ask yourself this, how much is my freedom worth? Because that's what the true value of gold and silver is.
Well, I hear you. And another question we have coming in from a few people, they're asking about copper and also platinum. And do you lump those in to precious metals category? I think copper to me stands a bit outside, certainly in the base metal category. I'm not sure that I see a monetary role there, but what would you say about copper and platinum?
Well, the sad part for me is this. I'm not talking about those as much as I should. I remember when copper, well, here's the thing. When I really started taking a step back and going, this whole Green New Deal, what are we talking about? We know silver is a big part of this, but what other ones are we talking about? What are the precious metals? Well, copper would be the other big metal. Nickel would be the other one. And we saw what happened in nickel. Was it the beginning of this year? How they shut down the market not once, twice, or 3 times because the value of nickel just shot up. That's the same thing we're going to look at for the other precious metals as well. Eventually, they're all going to start having that happen, in my opinion, and they're just going to start shooting up. But copper, besides silver, is another one of those must-have for this Green New Deal. I thought copper was really undervalued. As a coin collector, I remember when they were going away from making pennies out of copper because you had 1 penny, but it cost 3 cents to make. So it was like for every penny, people didn't realize you're gaining 2 cents in value. Why not get the pennies? One of the companies that I work with, and I hope I don't mind me mentioning, but my affiliation is with the Money Metals because I've done a lot of research and they have great customer service and they're a Christian family here in the United States, and I wanted to work with them. But they sell these like 35-pound bags of pennies. And I told people, look, man, that's a great deal. So as far as other precious metals, I don't talk about them enough. I think I need to start thinking about that. But copper to me and nickel are other 2 major precious metals. If we're looking at what these people have planned for us as far as this Green New Deal that's coming around here, those 2 will have a lot of demand, but I never pay attention to how much of it is actually mined. I know you know a lot about that. What do you know about nickel and copper as far as mining is concerned? We know silver is like a byproduct. When they're mining, they don't specifically just mine for silver unless they run into it.
Yeah, well, like you said, that's where a lot of the silver is coming from. I believe it's between 70 to 80% copper, nickel, lead, zinc, gold mines. And you mentioned what happened with nickel. We've heard a couple times in the past few months that there's concerns in the zinc markets.
There you go.
And I've been reading about structural deficits in copper and some of these other metals for a while. So far, it's been kept in check, but certainly not something that makes you feel confident about the system that they're running out there. And, it's like a car crash in slow motion, which can be hard to follow and digest, although, you look at where things are heading, and again, the problems that I don't see a way that they can reverse the money printing, and we will see how that goes. Although, Lee, I guess the last question we have here for you today, a couple of people were saying, where do you see silver by the end of the year? And perhaps there's a couple different buckets you can put things into. I don't think it's a straightforward question, but anything you would say there?
When I've done videos, I was predicting that gold would be around 2,500 by the end of last year, and somewhere around 3,200 by the end of this year. We see that gold is being held in check. So obviously my predictions aren't exactly accurate, but here's what I got to say about silver. The history tells us that the gold to silver ratio is somewhere around, I believe it's 15-1. I think that's one of the things that people should focus on the most when it comes to collecting silver, is pay attention to the tradition and the history of the ratio. I think it's way out of whack. I'll give this example, Chris, and you could kind of, respond to this. I told everybody that July, when all of a sudden the ratio is way out of whack, I was like, 124 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. I told everybody, I want you to consider this. Let's say I had 10 ounces of gold, and I saw that that ratio is way out of whack. And I know that's not realistic. I take my 10 ounces of gold, exchange it over, and now I got 1,240 ounces of silver because it's 124-1, right? I hold on to my silver. All of a sudden, the ratio got down around 68-1. Then I turn around and exchange my silver over, that I got my 1,240 ounces of silver. I now change it back into gold. So I went from having 10 ounces of gold to 18 ounces of gold, because there's people, that's what they do for a living. They pay attention to the ratio and they make a living off it. So you have to ask you. So, I shouldn't say you have to ask yourself, but the ratio is one of the things that you want to pay attention to. And right now, I think it's out of whack. It's way out of whack. Tradition or history has taught us that, it's normally somewhere around 15-1. If that's the case, then silver is the obvious buy. It's called the poor man's gold because it's a lot more affordable. But a lot of people can't afford gold, so silver is the answer.
Yeah, and we've seen quite a lot of volatility in the gold to silver ratio really over the last 100 years since the Fed was invented. And I guess what has early on led me into silver over gold is that so much of the silver consumed, we hear it's coming out of the ground 8 or 9-1, and then when you actually look at the investment grade stockpiles in terms of what's available in the investment grade form, there's less silver out there than gold. So when that converges, we shall see. But go ahead.
You brought something up, and I wasn't able to follow where you guys are on this. Ralphie got involved with buying something, some silver, and he wanted it delivered. What was the conclusion on that whole story? I don't know if you just want to briefly run people that might not be aware of what happened, but I always was going to ask you, what was the conclusion of that situation? Did they ever deliver it?
We did not get our contract delivered. I don't think that was necessary. To be clear, that wasn't the COMEX not delivering. It was more that, who was it? Interactive Brokers sent an advertisement saying they offered delivery. It was really of the warrant, not the actual metal. So it's not the easiest thing to execute, which is not to say that you can't. I've talked with people who have taken delivery of those contracts and gotten their metal. So it is possible. I don't think it's encouraged, but at least through Interactive Brokers, he was never able to get that contract.
So what is the solution to that? I guess, if they're not giving him his silver, what is the alternative?
Well, it's odd to me that the producers, they actually send their metal to the refinery, and then it goes to a trader who dishes it out to the industrial users. So really very little is actually going through the COMEX, yet it's the pricing that they set with the paper contract trading that determines the price that people are getting for the physical, which seems a little backwards, especially when, I guess my biggest issue with the whole thing is that if someone can just hammer any of the bids that are out there, which will drive the price lower. You can do that in any market, or you can't legally do it in any market, but the banks, in many markets do that. And that seems like a pretty faulty pricing system to me. And, the fact that Ross talked about how the futures market structure was able to tamp down the price, I think that at least speaks that we're not in a supply and demand market, which complicates things. But in either case, I appreciate you joining me here today, Lee. And could you just let folks know about where they can find you and the show you do and some of the things you dig into there?
I'm over there at Pimpy's Investment Chat. I do have a Facebook group with the same name. Come on over there and join us. We talk about gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, as well as other maybe off mainstream topics that people might find enjoyable. Nisera, Jasera, people ask me about it. The Iraqi dinar, the Vietnam dong, the Zim dollars. So that's why I've decided to talk about them on my channel and have been for a while. Because you'd be careful coming to my channel because I'm like a heavy dose of reality and a lot of things that I bring to people's attention they don't like, but at least I'm down to earth and I'm realistic about what's going on with those investments. So come join me over there at Pimpy's Investment Chat. We'll have a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Well, and I appreciate you do that because, some of these things aren't decided. We don't know how life is going to play out with all of these variables. You talked about some of the non-financial ones yet. To me, at least, not having my head in the sand, seeing what's out there so I can make the best decisions is something I appreciate. So appreciate that you're doing this, and people can find you at Pimpy's Investment Chat. As I mentioned earlier, also a thank you to Sierra Madre Gold and Silver. They're advancing their Tepic project and La Tigra project. Then last month, they added the La Guitarra gold silver mine from First Majestic. Fortunately, in some ways, about a year or two out from production, which means that hopefully you would like to think we'll be seeing a higher silver price by then. So either case, you can find out more about Sierra Madre at sierramadregoldandsilver.com. And with that said, I'd like to also just give a final thank you to everyone who joined us in the audience today. Hopefully we got to a couple of questions, but hopefully the discussion was helpful, and just want to wish everybody a good day out there and hope you're safe and staying well through all that's happening. And we will look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.
God bless.